Hello and welcome to today's presentation, From Essential to Exceptional, Strengthening the Animal Care Team's Role in Shelter Health. Today's webinar is being presented by Virox Technologies, Inc., makers of Rescue and Prevail Disinfectants. You'll have the opportunity to submit questions by typing them in the chat section located on the right side of your screen. Please send in your questions at any time. Our team is standing by to answer questions you have, and we'll be doing a Q&A at the end of the presentation. So without any further ado, let's get started. I would like to introduce Dr. Matthew Gitz, who serves as the Clinical Relations Lead Veterinarian at the University of Arizona College of Veterinary Medicine. His expertise includes vaccine protocols, sanitation, disinfection, and outbreak response. So you can take it away.
Excellent. Thank you very much. All righty. Hello, everybody, and thanks for having me today. I just want you to know this is a topic I care deeply about. I got my start cleaning kennels when I was 16 years old. Nobody gave me a lot of direction. Nobody told me what to do. They just kind of, here you go clean some stuff. And at the time, I didn't realize I didn't have that knowledge to do a really, really good job because nobody ever taught me those things. So that's kind of where the genesis of this lecture comes from, is I really want to make sure that you guys understand the why it is we do the things that we do, because I know we're all busy in shelters, and I know sometimes that's really, really hard to take a second and explain the why we do the things that we do. So today we're going to be talking about from essential to exceptional, strengthen the animal cares team's role in health. Today we're going to cover recognizing the animal care team's role in preventing disease outbreaks, understand biosecurity basics and the importance of shelter intake protocols, learn step-by-step cleaning and disinfection procedures, identify common mistakes that contribute to disease transmission, explore practical, cost-conscious methods to minimize disease spread in shelter environments, and finally, we're going to evaluate the impact of an integrated parvo prevention strategy using vaccination, deworming, and sanitation. So I like to kind of start out, every shelter is unique. And prior to me working at the University of Arizona, I worked in shelters for several years across many different states. I also worked in the pharmaceutical industry, and I visited shelters also across the United States. So I've seen a lot of different shelters out there. So there's many different shelter types. So we have our large open intake, usually municipal shelters. We have our managed admission shelters. We have our limited admission shelters. We have rescue-based organizations. So there are all kinds of different shelter types out there. Also, we have different animal populations. So maybe our shelter is mainly dogs and cats. Maybe we are in, a puppy rescue, or we are in a shelter that also takes in rabbits and things like that. So there's all kinds of different populations that we may come across. Our medical resources also may be different. So shelters that I've traditionally been at as a veterinarian, we had a medical clinic on site that sometimes was there to serve the shelter. It was sometimes there to serve the shelter and the public. Sometimes we have to take animals to a veterinarian to get care, things like that. So our medical resources are different. Our physical facilities are different. And that's kind of a very straightforward thing, right? So some of us are in, brand new state-of-the-art big shelters. And some of us are in shelters that maybe there's buildings there that were built in the 80s, those old cinder block walls, things like that. So every facility is different in terms of our physical facilities. Our staffing levels are different. So sometimes we are, full paid staff. Sometimes we are volunteer-based. Sometimes it's a mixture of both. All kinds of different staffing levels. My hope is we are all fully staffed all the time, right? We have extra people. So that way if somebody calls out sick, we have somebody to fill it. That's a dream. So funding and support. Sometimes we consist basically on donor donations. Sometimes we're tax funded if we're a municipal shelter. So all those things can kind of vary. And then geographic location. Again, I've been in Arizona, New Mexico, South Carolina, North Carolina, Oregon, all different areas. And that geographic location, would play into how I develop my shelter protocols. So this slide, I love this slide. The reason I put this slide together is everybody in a shelter, our number one goal is to make sure that the animals in our care and that come to see us, we give them the best possible outcome. And that includes everybody on the team, from the CEO to our behavior team, to people in our finance department, to our animal care teams. We all play a vital role in making sure the animals have the best possible outcome that they can have. So let's talk about the animal care team. And you guys are, you know, as far as I'm concerned, you're the rock stars in a shelter. I know your job is really, really hard. You're there sometimes 5 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning. You're the first ones in the building, and you're the last ones to leave at the end of the day. So, and you do the hard work. So you're more than just cleaning and feeding, though. I know people think of the ACTs, hey, they're there to clean and feed and do the things that we don't want to do. Your role is so much more than that. You guys have more knowledge of the animals in the care of that facility than anybody else. So when I was a veterinarian working in a shelter, in the mornings when I would do my rounds, I would talk to my ACTs because they knew, they were there first thing in the morning. Hey, Fluffy's coughing. Hey, you need to go look at this dog. Hey, this cat you need to go look at, things like that. Because you guys have that knowledge. You knew what they looked like the day before, and now you know what they look like this morning and going forward. So you have that knowledge, and that's really, really important and vital knowledge. You're also big advocates for those animals. And again, you may not think it, but hey, you see this dog is not doing well. You see this cat's not doing well. You're going to go tell, maybe the veterinarian, maybe one of the techs, maybe someone in operations. So you're going to advocate for that animal, which is also really important. And then you're also a trusted human. As a veterinarian in the shelter, when a dog or cat would come see me, I was drawing blood, I was giving them a vaccine, I was doing things that weren't always like, hey, nobody enjoys, I don't like getting shots. So I'm sure those animals didn't want to get shots. But you're feeding them, you're taking them on walks, you're giving them attention, you're doing all those things where you create that trusted bond that not a lot of other people do sometimes. And then I appreciate that you guys can have multiple roles. So yes, you may be an ACT in the morning, and then you may go work adoptions in the afternoon, or you may work on the behavior team, or you may work, on the education team, or you may go out to another shelter if you're part of the outreach programs, things like that. So there are lots of roles that you guys play within the shelter. So I think obviously one of the bases of this presentation is, hey, what do we do in terms of your role in outbreak prevention? Yes, cleaning and disinfecting is a vital piece of your job in terms of outbreak prevention. We don't want to be spreading disease around our shelters. But again, you guys, you're the first ones in the door and you're the last ones to leave. So you're going to be the ones that notice, hey, that dog's coughing, or hey, there's this going on, or this going on. So you're going to be the ones that spot those things first thing in the morning and are really going to be vital to letting people know as they come in, like, hey, we need to do this, we need to do that, or hey, I saw this dog had tons of, eye discharge, nasal discharge, coughing, sneezing, and I went ahead and isolated that dog away from the rest of the population. You're also going to be supporting the rest of the team. So especially if we're having a big shelter outbreak of a disease, you're going to be helping the veterinary team, the operations team, all those different people that get involved when we deal with the outbreak. You're one of those big pieces to it. So again, you play a major role in outbreak prevention at your shelter. So again, remember that you are a big piece of that. So let's talk biosecurity, because hey, germs don't take a day off. They're going to be in our shelter 24/7. So it's going to be a constant thing that we're going to have to worry about. So what is biosecurity? Biosecurity is a set of practices used to prevent the introduction and spread of infectious diseases within our shelter. It includes everything from cleaning and disinfection to our intake protocols to disease recognition, isolation procedures, and staff and animal movement. And we're going to kind of talk about a couple of those pieces later on. So the short version of biosecurity, it keeps germs out, it stops them from spreading, and it protects the animals in our care. So that's when we're talking about biosecurity, this is what we're talking about. So examples of infectious diseases in our shelter. Yep, we all know respiratory is a big one. And this is in no way that these lists can go longer. These are just a couple of examples. So Bordetella, influenza, calicivirus in cats. We've all seen respiratory disease in our shelter. Things like GI diseases. So, vomiting and diarrhea, parvo puppies, kittens with panleukopenia, coccidia. Those are all GI things. And then finally, some other things. Ringworm, especially, I'm a cat guy. You'll find that out through this lecture. I'm a cat guy. So ringworm is something I've seen a lot of, especially in kittens. I do have rabies on this list. I'm hoping that nobody here has seen rabies, but it is one that, hey, we can't see in the shelter setting. And then again, scabies, mites, things like that. So these are just different diseases that we see in a shelter. I don't want to say commonly because rabies is on that list. But generally speaking, respiratory and GI are the two biggest areas that we worry about in terms of diseases in our shelters. So what's your role in the biosecurity part of this? So again, cleaning and disinfection, yes, it is that basis of biosecurity. We want to make sure we're killing pathogens, keeping the pathogens low in our environment, and things like that. We want to prevent cross-contamination. So again, if your job in the morning is, hey, I'm on an ACT in the morning, and then I'm going to go to adoptions in the afternoon, we got to remember, hey, we could be dealing with sick animals in the morning, but in the afternoon, we're dealing with healthy animals. So we want to prevent that cross-contamination. So things, taking an extra set of clothes, things like that. We'll see some more examples later on. We want to monitor for signs of illness. So again, you guys are the first ones in the door in the morning. You're going to be the ones that notice things are off with an animal, coughing, sneezing, vomiting, diarrhea, all those things that you're going to look for. So it's, again, vital that you're going to then report those things that you see. And then it's one of my favorite words, don't be a fomite. So for those of you that don't know what a fomite is, it's basically an inanimate object. So it's our cell phones, it's our keys, it's our shoes, our scrub tops. Anything that has the ability to carry disease from one place to another is a fomite. Humans in a shelter, we're one giant fomite. And you can definitely accuse me of being a fomite. I've done things like go in, mess with parvo puppies, maybe spray myself down with a chemical, and then walk and do something else type of thing. And hey, I felt better because I didn't, I'm not spreading disease. In fact, I was. So humans, we are a big reason sometimes that disease spreads in a shelter. So whether you're a veterinarian, a vet tech, operations, ACTs, CEO, we're all walking through a shelter. We have the ability to spread disease. So we're a big fomite. So most shelters, I think, we're going to have our intake protocols, and we're going to get to those like the closest possible when that animal comes into our facility. We all probably vary when we're going to do that, but for the most part, it's going to be something that we're going to prioritize and do pretty early on. And the reason why I bring up shelter intake protocols is one, so you guys understand it, but two, because I think ACTs sometimes play a role in the shelter intake protocols depending on the different hats you wear in a shelter. So shelter intake protocols, we want to do our best to make it a predictable process for staff. We want to make sure people get into a routine. It's muscle memory. We know what the next step is going to be, things like that. We don't want it to be chaotic. We don't want to be like, well, I don't know what we're doing. Okay, now we're going to do this. I guess we're going to do that. So we really want to make sure we have a good, predictable process for staff. We also want to make sure that when we intake that animal, we are inputting the medical records, accurately, or any records associated accurately. Most shelter software has the ability to do outbreak tracing and things like that. We want to make sure that the animals that are in the system, everything is correct, because if we have an outbreak, we want to be able to track that back and figure out, hey, that dog was in building B in kennel number 3, and now it's over here and now it's over there, and we can track it back and be like, okay, these are the possible exposed animals because of an outbreak. So we want to make sure we have accurate records from the very, very beginning. And then we want to make sure our intake is organized. Again, this kind of goes back to the first part, but we want to get into a routine. We want to make sure we know where everything is, what everybody's doing, what all the different roles are, because it decreases our stress, and hence it decreases the stress of the animals as well. So let's make sure it's good, organized, everything's set to go. So common intake protocols, I put health screenings in quotation marks. So I think a lot of us can very easily look at it and be like, yep, that dog's coughing, that dog's sneezing, that dog's having vomiting, that dog's having diarrhea on the cat side as well. We can get a general idea just by looking at an animal, whether it, kind of at face value looks good and healthy, or hey, there's a concern that needs to be, this dog needs to be looked at, this cat needs to be looked at. So doing those health screenings as part of that intake process is really important. Vaccination is obviously very important. I worked for Merck Animal Health for many years, so vaccines are something I talked a lot about. Vaccines are really, really important. We want to make sure we're doing that on intake and then following those protocols that we've set. Our distemper parvo, if we're old enough for rabies, Bordetella, HCP for the cats, all those different things. And deworming. I think most of us on intake are going to do deworming, whether it's pyrantel, fenbendazole, penazaril. We all have our different combinations that we do. In terms of flea and tick, I think it kind of depends on, again, shelter resources, where you're located, things like that. But obviously, when I was in the Carolinas, everything got flea and tick on intake. In the desert of Arizona, I worry about ticks. I don't necessarily worry about fleas. So it kind of depends on where we're at. And then finally, a microchip. Some of us may do it at the time of surgery. Some of us may do it at intake. I generally really advocated to do it at the time of intake unless there was an underlying issue why we couldn't, because again, that's a unique identifier for that animal. And if that animal gets loose or that mylar collar comes off, maybe it's a kennel that has two very looking similar dogs and the mylar collars came off. Hey, we have a microchip to fall back on. So I think that's also really important to get a microchip in an animal as soon as possible. And then let's talk about why vaccination isn't enough. When I give a vaccine, that animal is not immune that second I give the vaccine. I wish that was true. I wish I could just give a vaccine and not have to worry about parvo, distemper, all those other things that can really, really be an issue in a shelter. But unfortunately, it takes a couple days before we even start to get a response to that vaccine. I'm not saying they're fully vaccinated in 3 to 5 days. I'm saying the body is starting to respond to that vaccine in a couple days. So it's not an instant thing. Maternal antibody interference, that's something we could spend an hour talking about. However, what I'm going to tell you about maternal antibodies is puppies, kittens, when they're first born, and hopefully they are, they're nursing, they're with mom, they get that colostrum from mom, they get what we call maternal antibodies. That is able to help them fight disease very early in life. However, those maternal antibodies, if they're really high, can interfere with our vaccines. And that's one of the reasons why we give vaccines usually in a shelter every 2 weeks, is because of maternal antibody interference. So again, it's just something to kind of stick in the back of your head. And no, I'm not going to go that much further into detail on it. Sick or stressed animals, again, depending on your shelter. When I was in Phoenix, we pulled dogs and cats that are sometimes 6-7 hours away. So they would have long transports and then they would come in. So they were stressed from travel, or maybe they were sick from their other shelter or things like that. Maybe they had disease that we just didn't see yet. And circulating illness in our population is another one. So maybe there's something going around in our population that hasn't shown up yet. Maybe it's one of those, hey, it's at incubation time where they have disease, but we're not seeing clinical signs yet. And maybe it's an upper respiratory that the next day is going to break type of thing. So all those things are to consider why vaccination alone isn't enough and why cleaning and sanitation and disinfection are so important. And then again, vaccines reduce risk, but they do not create a bubble. So let's get into the crux of it. So sanitation, disinfection, the basics that build better outcomes. And I do think this is such a key piece within a shelter, and people sometimes don't appreciate. Again, I started 16 years old cleaning kennels. Unless you've had that role, you don't appreciate, like, this is a hard role. It's a lot of manual labor. It's early hours in the morning. It's sometimes late in the afternoon. If you live in Arizona in the middle of August, it's 120 degrees. So it can be, very uncomfortable. Maybe you're in Minnesota in December. All those things, like this is a hard job that you guys have to do. So when we're looking at different types of disinfectants, it's important to kind of look at these key factors. I know that these decisions are made, probably above you at the operations level, more senior level, but what are things that we consider when we're looking at chemicals and disinfectants? First, is it safe for the animals? And is it safe for us? We want to make sure it's safe for both of us. Does it kill the pathogens we need it to kill? Does it kill canine parvovirus? And I'm going to come back to that again, but that's kind of my standard. Does it kill parvo? Yes, good to go. How long does it take to work? The required contact time. Is it 5 minutes? Is it 10 minutes? Is it longer? So how long is it going to take to actually kill those pathogens? Does it still work if we have a little bit of organic matter left over? One of my previous bosses used to call it poop smear. So if we have poop smear left over, is it going to break down that chemical, or is that chemical going to work effectively? Is it easy to apply to our surfaces? We have so many surfaces in a shelter. We have sealed concrete, we have FRP, we have stainless steel. I mean, you name it, we have so many different surfaces. So is it easy to apply to a surface? Does it kill hard to kill parvovirus, or does it kill parvovirus, basically? If it does, again, check, great, that's what I'm looking for. And in the process, is it easygoing in terms of our equipment? Is it caustic to our equipment or corrosive to our equipment? Does it break down? Does it cause a lot of rust? Things like that. So those are all things that we look at when we're looking at different chemical and disinfectants. So this is just an example of the sanitation disinfection protocol. What I always tell people whenever I give lectures like this is there are a lot of things to consider. And again, we are all different. We all have different shelters, populations, things like that, different funding levels. Pick some, really try to pick something that is really, really good and fits within all the parameters we need it to fit in. So this is just an example, but obviously we want to temporarily relocate the animal. So if it's a dog and we have indoor-outdoor runs, everybody goes outside. Cool, we clean the inside, and then everybody comes in and we clean the outside. So things like that. Maybe we have play yards, etc. Again, I'm a cat guy, so hey, hopefully we have portalized kennels and we can push them to the other side and then push them back. So again, we have to relocate that animal. We want to remove everything, bedding, bowls, etc. It all comes out. And then manually remove the organic matter. I have a lot of cats, I'll admit. I scoop the litter boxes in my house. My wife's also a veterinarian. I get to scoop the litter box in the house. I hate scooping litter boxes. I can probably complain in my head every night when I'm scooping litter boxes. But I do it every single day. And it's really, really important. We want to remove that organic material. And again, I appreciate how annoying that is. When we used to have dogs, I picked up the dog poop. I hated it, but I did it. You want to use things like low flow pressure hoses in the beginning, and we'll kind of get into why that is a little bit later on. But rinse kind of if there's leftover stuff, rinse it down with low pressure. And then we're going to apply our cleaning and disinfectant solution. Hopefully, we'll get into types later on. Hopefully, we're using something that has both cleaning properties and disinfectant properties. So basically detergent properties and disinfectant. So that way we don't have to use two chemicals. We want it to sit for its allotted contact time. This is very, very important. Again, I'm going to get into it a little bit later on, but is it 5 minutes? Is it 10 minutes? What's that contact time? And then after it's sat for that contact time, we then use high pressure water, high pressure hoses to rinse things down after it's sat for that amount of time. If it's, a cat condo, we're wiping stuff down, etc. And then we want to let it dry thoroughly. Again, I'm in Arizona, things dry like that. I don't have to worry about it too much. When I was in Eastern Carolina, no way. It took stuff forever to dry out. So we want to let things dry though, because putting things back into wet environments actually has been shown to cause more disease. So let everything dry out. And then obviously replace it with any clean thing, clean bedding, clean bowls, things like that. And then depending on our shelter protocols, we're returning that animal back to its original housing area, or maybe it's going to adoption. So things like that, but also, again, make that fit within your shelter protocols. And then order of care, kind of three big areas. Our healthy pets, our non-infectious animals come next. So maybe a dog has thyroid issues or a diabetic cat or something that's kind of, harboring that immune system. And then finally, our infectious animals. So upper respiratory, parvo, ringworm, whatever we're dealing with type of thing. So in an ideal world, if I could staff a shelter and not have to worry about, pay and things like that, all the things that go into hiring people, I would hire a team for my healthy animals, a team for my non-infectious animals, and a team for my infectious animals, and keep them all separate. So that I wouldn't have to worry about cross-contamination or people being fomites or things like that. But I know that's probably not the ideal. I know most of us probably don't have that ability to do that, but that's what I would do, is really divide them out. But since we can't do all your healthy animals, then your non-infectious, then your infectious animals. So let's talk about shortcuts. And I am guilty of probably taking each one of these shortcuts at some point in my career, whether as a kennel assistant, a vet tech, even a veterinarian. I've probably taken some of these shortcuts. So I'm not without fault in this. However, things that I think are really, really important. Making clear protocols for your staff. So important. People want to know how to do a good job. Again, I'm truly of the belief, we all show up at a shelter every day wanting to do a good job because we know the animals depend on us. So let's give our teams the ability to do the best job they can do. And that starts out by just having a very clear protocol. Hey, you need to do this, like the cleaning protocol I just went over. Do this, do that type of thing. Make it easy to follow, easy to understand. Also, take the time to train our new staff. And again, I know that's really hard. I've been in that position. when I've been medical director and I've hired on a new vet assistant and I just didn't have time to train them and I kind of just was like, here you go. So let's not do that. Let's do our best to take the time to train our staff. And again, I know we're all busy and we're all stretched thin. Guessing on dilution ratios. Yep, I'm 100% going to admit to this. Hey, I have a bucket of water. I'm going to mop the floor. Yeah, there's some bleach. Yeah, there's some more bleach. That should be fine, right? Totally. That can actually be really detrimental because if you don't do enough chemical and it's below the concentration, you're not killing anything. So that way, you're setting yourself up for outbreaks. Or if you go too concentrated, it can actually be harmful. And the way you'll kind of know sometimes that you went too much on the concentration is, especially on dogs, you'll see that they'll get really red and irritated bellies because that concentration is still on the surface of those kennels. So things to look for. Skipping the full contact time. Again, I didn't appreciate full contact time until I worked in a shelter, and I actually was my director of operations that really talked to me about like the importance of contact time and chemicals. And so I think that's really important. Follow that. Is it 5 minutes? Is it 10 minutes? And make sure when you hire somebody on, that's one of the first things you tell them because they may be like, cool, I'm gonna, put up the chemical and I'm gonna rinse it down a minute later, next kennel, next kennel, next kennel. And they don't realize that contact time is really, really important. You should never have a need to mix disinfectants. And I still, to this day, I had a really good friend who was a veterinarian, boarded in a specialty, very smart. She thought she could mix bleach and rescue together. I'm glad she didn't. It would have made a really volatile chemical compound. There's no need to ever mix disinfectants. But I get those questions from time to time. High pressure hoses before you're actually cleaning and disinfecting and things like that. So let's say I have a pile of dog poop and I know I would much rather just take my high pressure hose and rinse it on down and not have to scoop it. If I could do that with my litter boxes too, that'd be great. But what does that do? That aerosolizes whatever's in that dog poop. So, or if it's vomit or whatever, it's going to aerosolize it, which means the dogs are going to inhale it. Potentially the cats are going to inhale it depending on how your shelter's set up. It also means you are going to inhale it. So just remember that when you're using that high pressure hose on dog poop, you're going to be inhaling those particles as well. And those particles can sit up in the air for a long time. So really, really, when I see somebody using high pressure hose and they haven't done anything else yet, and that's what they're using to start with, it makes me cringe. Not letting the kennels dry completely. Again, I think it's really, really important to let them know, like, hey, like your new staff that you trained, we need to let these kennels dry. They need to be completely dry before we put an animal back in, just because a wet kennel can cause more disease. And then ignoring that front of the kennel. Yep, we've all had puppies in our shelter, right? We've had a kennel with puppies. We take the puppies out. We clean the shelter. We clean the kennel. It's beautiful. We put the puppies back in. And 5 minutes later, what are those puppies done? They pooped everywhere and they put their poopy paws up on the kennel bars and on the walls and things like that. And I know those kennel bars are really challenging to clean sometimes and it's a real pain, but that's a perfect area for parvo to hide out. So make sure you are cleaning those kennel bars, especially in those crevices. And then not all disinfectants are equal. I love this picture when I found it. Like this, it was a perfect picture when I found it. So hey, every chemical is different. Let's take a second. Let's go over them. Let's think about it. But I get sometimes it can be really complicated. So I'm going to hit the high points of the three major chemicals that I see used in the shelter and the vet clinic, things like that. So the first one that I think we can all identify with is sodium hypochlorite, so bleach. Obviously, it's very, very cost effective. Bleach is a very, very cheap chemical. You can easily get it. Hey, if I don't have the big 55-gallon drum, I can go to the grocery store and get a bottle of bleach. Very easy to find and very cost effective. Easy to do the dilution, right? 1/2 cup to a gallon gives me 1 to 32. For 10 minutes, that kills parvo. Great. That's straightforward. That's easy to do. And again, since it kills parvo, and that's kind of our standard that we use, we're killing parvo, cool. Bleach, that's awesome. However, the big con with bleach and why it's probably not it shouldn't be your primary chemical in a shelter environment is it has no basically cleaning / detergent activity whatsoever. So that means you're going to be taking I'm going to use Dawn dish soap as an example because we all know what that is. We're going to be scrubbing that kennel. We're going to be taking several minutes to really, really scrub that kennel rinse down everything, rinse everything down because we can't have any organic material. So no poop, no vomit, no dog hair, nothing. That's all organic material that will neutralize that bleach. You can have a pile of dog poop and take a bottle of bleach and pour it on that pile of dog poop, and it's just going to neutralize the bleach, and it's just going to smell like bleach. It's not going to kill anything. So bleach does not hold up in the face of organic material. It's also inactivated by sunlight. Again, I'm in Arizona. Sunlight all the time, right? It's gonna kill all that bleach, and then those bleach fumes can be really detrimental to us and to the animals. You and I have the ability to leave that environment after we reuse the bleach, but let's say it's your foster building and there's a bunch of kittens and puppies. They don't have the ability to leave that foster building per se, so they're gonna unfortunately smell those fumes and can make them pretty sick. Quaternary ammonias is something that I have seen as well. So, and why would you? It's called parvusol, right? So parvusol, it must kill parvo, and I get it. That's a pretty easy connection there. So with quaternary ammonias, there is some detergent activity, so you can have some poop smear left over, as my old boss used to say, and we're still gonna, have a pretty effective chemical. It's got low tissue toxicity, but we'll get into that a little bit in just a second. So overall, those pros make it look, hey, this is something we could use, right? This is a pretty good chemical. Unfortunately, there's been multiple studies that have shown that quaternary ammonia compounds are not necessarily that effective against canine parvovirus. And in a shelter setting where we have such a high risk for parvo, if I have a chemical that I'm using that isn't 100% against my canine parvovirus, I don't know if I can sleep at night. So I really think because of that, it makes it really hard to say, hey, you should be using quaternary ammonia. Also, it can be harmful to kitties if it's on their fur, if they're licking surfaces. And again, cat guy, I don't want to be using anything that could be harmful to the cats in my care. You'll know it too. They'll get really like ulcerations around their lips and on their tongue and things like that if they are licking chemical, etc. So cats don't hide it. It's pretty obvious to see when they're having some issues with a chemical compound. And then amazingly enough, during COVID, we all, hey, Clorox wipes, bleach, cool, I'm going to kill this. I'm going to kill it because I got my Clorox wipes. Clorox wipes are actually quaternary ammonias at the end of the day. They are not bleach compounds. So because of that, we do have questionable efficacy against parvo. And I've seen plenty of places that I've visited that use Clorox wipes, and I really tell them, hey, that's not actually killing that parvo. So you may want to switch and use a different product. So let's talk about accelerated hydrogen peroxide, and I think most of us know this as Rescue. I have been a major proponent of Rescue long before this lecture, when I started in shelters probably almost 10 years ago now. Every shelter that I've been in, if we weren't using Rescue, I was like, we're changing today because I need to have something that I know is going to be effective against canine parvovirus. So I think, overall, a lot of pros. Broad spectrum efficacy against pathogens, especially, hey, I know it's going to kill canine parvovirus, which makes me be able to sleep at night. It's got short contact time, so a 5-minute contact time. So it's saving my staff time. In Arizona, they're not hanging out in the heat all day long, things like that. It is safe for the animals and the staff. It has both detergent and a disinfectant. So if I have poop smear left over, it's going to still be effective against those pathogens that's in that poop smear. It also has a long shelf life, unlike some of our other like bleach that, hey, if it's out, it gets sunlight, it's gone. Rescue is has a lot longer shelf life to it. The only con is it's a little bit higher of an upfront cost, but I'm going to make an argument that in the long run, if you look at it over time and the use and how you're going to use it in your shelter, that it probably actually saves you money at the end of the day. So when we're looking at disinfectants, this is just kind of a short kind of comparison chart. So again, bleach, quaternary ammonias like Parvusol and Rescue are the three that we're comparing here. Yep, bleach is cheap, easy to get. Rescue is a little bit higher upfront costs, but Rescue also has detergent to it. It also has a shorter contact time. It's also really, really effective against parvo. Bleach is effective against parvo, but Rescue is really effective against parvo. And again, it is we're going to save time in terms of that 5 minutes. Well, plus it is not toxic to the dogs and cats and other animals in our care. Again, important to me, it's not toxic to my kitties. So I again, just looking at this chart, it's kind of a no-brainer of why I would pick Rescue. versus the other two chemical compounds. And then when we're looking at cost saving benefits, so for those of you that are looking at your budgets and you're maybe manager of operations, director of operations, things like that, I get it. So we have to look at the budget. We also have to look at things in terms of our live release rates, our length of stay rates, all those different metrics that we look at when we're assessing how well our shelter's doing. So Rescue is going to decrease our medical costs and our shorter holds. How is it going to do that? If I have less parvo in my shelter, then I'm spending less money on those medical costs for those animals, and then I'm getting them out the door quicker. So per cost per animal, I think it's going to bring down that cost per animal in terms of overall costs, in terms of also length of stay, et cetera, all those different things. We're going to have fewer outbreaks, and which means we're going to have healthier animals, which means animals are going to be going through our system a lot quicker, getting adopted, getting into happy homes, things like that. It's also faster cleaning. A 5-minute dwell versus a 10-minute dwell versus an even longer dwell for some other products. So we're going to cut down in terms of our staff time. And then our staff, hey, they can be, again, ACTs in the morning, and then they can do, let's go work in adoptions. Let's go work in behavior, all those other things. That's the beauty of working in a shelter. You can do various things throughout your day, and it gives you a lot of variety, and I think makes us all happier sometimes. So better outcomes, more adoptions, fewer returns. We all hate it, right? When we adopt out an animal, and 3 days later, we get a phone call from an angry adopter saying, you adopted me out this sick dog, and I blame it all on you. When in fact, hey, when that dog walked out the door, to our best of our knowledge, that dog was happy and healthy. It may have had something incubating, but that's always going to be a challenge in shelter. But if we can decrease that possibility, if we can decrease the possibility of canine parvovirus, things like that, I think that's really, really important. And then safer on equipment. We're not going to get rust all over our stainless steel. That's a big thing. There's a lot of different stainless steel, in shelters, and I think if you use something like bleach, it's really going to be corrosive towards that, versus Rescue is not. So healthier animals plus safer for staff plus lower length of stay. That is my argument for why it actually saves you money in the long term when you look at it on a cost per animal basis. So let's talk about puppies. And again, yes, kitty person, but I still love puppies. I saw a puppy recently, I do relief on the side, and the staff made fun of me because I just melted over this puppy. So I still think puppies are adorable. So why puppies matter to your shelter? They do great on social media. Everybody loves their social media feeds, and everybody will stop. I guarantee if it's a puppy or a kitten or something like that, everybody stops their feeds and looks to see what is that animal doing. So they're great on social media. In terms of, they bring people into shelters. So somebody may think, hey, I want a puppy. I saw this puppy, on your Facebook, and now I'm going to come and see you at the shelter. And maybe they actually don't actually get that puppy. Maybe they're like my wife that takes home that 14-year-old dachshund that has the worst mouth ever type of thing. So, they attract people into our shelters, but maybe those people go home with other animals and not that puppy. They make great stories, great photos, great stories, things like that. Everybody loves a good story. They get adopted usually pretty quickly. Again, in my previous shelter, puppies were usually gone. As soon as they got to the adoption floor, they were usually gone within the same day. They get higher adoption fees, which I think, let's kind of look at that a little bit closer. If a puppy gets a higher adoption fee, that is going to give me more financial resources to then take care of that 14-year-old dachshund with that horrible mouth, or maybe take care of that senior cat, things like that. So I think, getting a higher adoption fee for a puppy can really, really help the rest of the shelter. It's good fundraising opportunities. When we used to have our big gala events, we'd always take the puppies. And believe me, donors were like, that's so cute. And they would want to take pictures, like great fundraising opportunities. So in short, puppies bring the attention. They bring the funding, a chunk of funding, and they're opportunities for the whole shelter. So again, we're using Rescue to kill canine parvovirus, so we can have higher adoption rates with our puppies and hopefully make some more income from the puppies so we can support the rest of our shelter. So puppies, though, they are prone to parvovirus, right? So which ones are the most prone? So obviously unvaccinated puppies between about 6 weeks and 6 months of age, that can vary a little bit. Puppies with heavy parasite loads or weakened immune systems. This is something, again, I didn't appreciate until I got to a shelter setting. I've been a veterinarian for several years at that point, but really deworming, I think, is important to decrease that parasite load so that way their immune system responds better to vaccines. Stressed or recently transported puppies can also be prone to parvo because we're stressing their immune system. And then obviously, if we have a crowded environment with puppies, if we have a shelter that has a ton of puppies, yes, we are more prone to parvovirus because we see parvovirus in puppies. And then in the environment, so canine parvovirus is what we call a non-enveloped or naked virus, which actually makes it harder to kill. And you would think by, hey, if it's naked and it's non-enveloped, like shouldn't that be easier to kill? It actually makes it harder to kill. That's a whole other lecture of itself. So, but just know that's one property of canine parvovirus that makes it challenging to kill. And it can also persist in the environment for months. So I'm going to make an argument. Sometimes we have a parvo puppy in a kennel, right? And we say, hey, no more dog in that kennel for 24 hours. You should say like 9 months if that's going to be the thought process to it. And the reason is if you are cleaning, disinfecting, sanitizing that kennel properly, you shouldn't have to wait to then use it again. So parvovirus, it's not going to die in 24 hours, and not putting an animal in that kennel for 24 hours isn't going to make a difference if that's the basis for it. What is going to make the difference is using the correct chemical agents and disinfectant, such as Rescue, to make sure that the parvovirus is dead. And then finally, fomite transmission. Yep, I'm just as guilty of it. My scrub top, my hands, my shoes, etc. We got to be careful. We're one big fomite and parvovirus, since it survives really easily. If you have it on your shoe and you're walking around in the shelter, you have a chance of spreading parvo. So let's talk about the prevention triangle. So a couple of things here. So, and I think ACTs play into all of these things, again, depending on what your different roles are in the shelter. Obviously, when we get that animal in, we want to vaccinate that animal as soon as we get it into our care. We want to deworm that animal. So again, pyrantel, fenbendazole, things like that. We want to make sure we're deworming that animal so that the immune system can respond properly to those vaccines that we're going to give it. And then finally, and a big piece of that is, hey, sanitation, disinfection of our environment to make sure we are preventing the spread of pathogens, not just parvo, but all pathogens throughout our environment. So that's the 3 ways we're going to really focus on preventing parvovirus spread in our shelter. So why vaccines matter? So vaccination is the basis of parvo prevention in terms of from the immune standpoint. From the environmental standpoint, it is cleaning and sanitation. But from the immune standpoint, vaccination for parvovirus is the basis of parvovirus prevention. We're going to vaccinate usually on intake, so DA2 for those of us that have been in the profession long enough, DH2 same thing, or our distemper parvovirus is what we refer to it as. Most likely, we're going to repeat that every 2 weeks until 18 to 20 weeks of age. Again, there may be a little bit of variation. There shouldn't be variation that goes below that 2 weeks. It can go greater, it can go up to 4 weeks. But I think most of us in a shelter setting are going to be vaccinating every 2 weeks. And then we want to make sure we are storing our vaccines correctly. So that means keeping it in a cold environment. Usually most vaccines, it's between about 36-ish degrees and 45 degrees is what you want to store them at. And then once you mix them, you want to give them right away. You don't want to mix them up at the beginning of the day and then give them maybe middle of the morning, mid-afternoon, things like that. Once you mix a vaccine, it lasts for about 45 minutes to an hour. So you want to make sure you're vaccinating, hopefully ASAP, but if not within that hour. If you're waiting until the afternoon after you vaccinate, if you pulled up that vaccine in the morning, you're waiting until the afternoon, you're just wasting your money. That vaccine's not doing anything for you. And I think deworming is a really important piece. And again, I didn't learn this really until I was working in shelters and vaccinology and things like that. We really want to make sure we're deworming upon intake, and then again every 2 weeks, especially in our puppies, because by decreasing that worm burden, those hookworms, those roundworms, we allow the body to respond to vaccines better, to have better efficacy. So that way we can ensure, hey, our vaccines are doing the best they can to prevent parvovirus spread. So that's the reason for deworming, among many other reasons for deworming. But when it comes to talking about parvovirus specifically, We are deworming to improve the immune system of those puppies. And then sanitation, disinfection is the other really, really big piece here. So parvovirus spreads through feces and survives on surfaces for months in those ideal environments. So we want to make sure we are scooping first, not taking a high pressure hose to dog poop as much as we want to, especially if we had a bunch of puppies in that run and then we took a high pressure hose to it. So we want to make sure we're getting rid of all that fecal material to the best of our ability. And then we're using a proven killer or a proven parvo killer like Rescue, because we want to make sure we are, killing as much parvo pathogen as possible. And then if we're killing parvo pathogen, everything else is just going to fall to the wayside. We want to respect those contact times. So again, if we're doing our concentration of 1 to 16, we're doing it for 5 minutes. That's what we need to kill that parvovirus. And then if we have specific areas of our shelter, some shelters kind of divide out puppies from adults, things like that. In our puppy areas, we really want to focus more on those high risk areas, things like that. Maybe for shelters doing like puppy play dates or et cetera, we just want to really focus on the area where we have higher potential risk for parvo. So in conclusion, so first of all, you guys matter in a shelter. And I know sometimes because you're there first thing in the morning, not a lot of people see you, things like that. You truly matter in a shelter. And as a veterinarian, I used to ask my ACTs all the time about the animals in my care. So you matter, you're that first line of defense for those animals. I ask you to be consistent when you're doing your job. As much as we want to take those shortcuts, as much as I want to be like, hey, I got to get all this done because I got to go pick up my kids from school, or I got to go do this, or I got to go do that. Be consistent in how you do things. Don't take those shortcuts. It'll save you time in the long run. I know in that particular moment, it may not, but in the long run, if you're not having to deal with outbreaks, it's going to save you time. And you want to set that standard. So as you hire new staff on or new staff come there, a lot of us that, start off as ACTs, we're younger. It's kind of the first job maybe we have. We're getting into animal care. Maybe we want to go work in a shelter. We want to be a vet tech, or we want to be a veterinarian, things like that. We want to make sure that we're setting that example. So again, we're respecting that contact time. We're mixing chemicals properly. We're not being a fomite. We're not moving stuff through our shelter. So you want to set that example. And then again, you want to make it count. All those little things that you do, they add up. I had my different ways of making it count. Again, I would take 5 minutes every day, maybe 10 minutes, and I would go just spend it with the kittens and foster. Because I enjoyed doing it. They enjoyed the attention. It was great. We all benefited from it. But all those little things that we do, from cleaning and sanitation to, giving those animals loving care, spending time with them, things like that, those all add up and they all give that animal, a better outcome. So thank you for coming today. I really, really appreciate it. I appreciate that I've had the chance to talk to you guys. I will definitely take questions. These are two of my own kitties. The one in the back, if you're from North Carolina, came from a rescue called Brother Wolf. And the one here came from Asheville Humane, and it's Squiddy and T-Bird.
Oh, they are adorable. Thank you so much, Dr. Gates. We will begin answering some questions. We had a few that came up. The first one is, do you microchip on stray holds?
So that'd be one exception, because if it is within that 72-hour period, depending on your county laws, you may not be able to do it. So that is an exception there in terms of stray holds, things like that. So, yeah.
Perfect. So the next one comes from Patty, who volunteers at their shelter's vaccine clinic, and asked what the best response to a dog or cat owner who says their dog doesn't interact with other dogs and doesn't need HD or DHPP, or cat owners who say the cat is a house cat and doesn't need the FVRCP vaccine.
Yeah, so I really try to do a couple things, and the first thing I always do with people that have a little bit of hesitancy with vaccines is to acknowledge their concerns. I found that goes a long way with them, and then I talk about more like, hey, like I'm gonna use cats as an example. So all my kitties are vaccinated, including for feline leukemia, and I talk about how, hey, none of us are planning on getting another cat, right? We're all like, nope, no more cats, we're done. And then we're outside of Home Depot one day or outside of Walmart and somebody's giving away kittens. or giving away puppies. And then we're going to take that puppy, that kitten, et cetera, and bring it into our house. And that animal may be carrying disease that then could expose your animals to that disease. So I try to kind of go out about it from that way, because very rarely very rarely does somebody say, I'm only going to have this one dog. I'm only going to have this one cat. Nope, I'm not getting anything else. Everybody always eventually does. So I kind of go at it from a future planning standpoint versus using scare tactics.
Perfect. The next question asks, do you recommend using Rescue every time you clean, or just when sanitizing or disinfecting before putting a different animal in a kennel?
Couple reasons why I would recommend it for all those things. So one is, I think if you have different chemicals, it's confusing for staff. And that confusion can kind of lead to breakdown, where they're like, oh, I'm just going to use this chemical today, not that chemical today. So I think from a consistency standpoint, in terms of staff training, the less chemicals you have in your environment and the less options, the less likely you are to get confusion. And then again, I use Rescue, and I always have from start to finish, because I know it's going to kill parvo, and I don't have to worry about using another chemical that may not be 100% against a parvo, or if there's organic material and it's bleach, that's going to break down that bleach. So I just always keep to the one chemical rule.
Perfect. We did have a question, is it useful to use bleach when then disinfect at the end? But I do believe you covered that already with bleach not having detergent properties.
Yep.
Another attendee asked, once a parvo puppy has been in a foster home, how long do you recommend waiting before placing another unvaccinated puppy in that home?
Yep. And that I've had that debate many times in shelters. I think that's a little bit tougher, because we all have our fosters that are like great fosters, right? And they will do every little thing that we ask them. But we don't know. We don't have control over that environment. We most likely not been to that person's house. We don't know what their setup is, things like that. And I do think so that makes it a little bit more challenging. I think if you were to say, hey, what's that time period? And you wanted to be one of those organizations that wanted to put a time period on it to be safe. A lot of studies show that like 9 months is kind of that cutoff. However, I think, again, make it straightforward and simple. Call it a year. I think that makes it a lot easier. But if it's one of those fosters that's, hey, like they keep the puppies in this area, they don't go outside of their house, like they're in the kitchen area, or they're in the garage area, or wherever they are, where you have services that you can clean, disinfect, get rid of the dog poop, go over concentration time with them, go over contact time, et cetera, go over all those things, and they're the type of people that are going to follow that, then yes, I think you could probably have them continue to take puppies and not put that time frame on it. It's going to vary on the organization, so I know that doesn't answer the question, but I think it does vary. But again, I think if you have fosters that are really, really committed and their environments are good, then I don't think you have to wait that year. So.
Perfect. And we had another question that I can briefly answer as well before you give your recommendations, but do you have any recommendations for proper disinfection for laundry items? I will say Rescue Disinfectants should not be used in the laundry, as we're registered as to use on hard, non-porous surfaces, but our ready-to-use liquid is one of the only EPA registered disinfectants to carry a soft surface sanitation claim. So I could send those resources in the follow-up email as well for anyone who'd be more interested.
The only other thing I'm going to put on that is people love to donate stuff to shelters, and bedding and towels is really, really easy. So like, I'm not a wasteful human being, but if you have soiled stuff from parvo puppies, just throw it out sometimes too. If it's that gross, just throw it out. But remember, feces is how parvo is transmitted, so make sure it is washed, and all that stuff is washed away, etc. Because it's harbored in feces. So, but I agree in terms of what Angelica said as well.
Perfect. So another question, do you have any specific recommendations on avoiding spread of Bordetella? It seems like we are constantly dealing with outbreaks and would love to try and bring that down.
I think a lot of it. So there's a couple pieces to that, and I can think that may be a longer kind of explanation, but I'm going to try and make it really short. So let's say I have a 50-pound dog in front of me, and it coughs or sneezes. That pathogen can have a radius of 20 feet. So that also, just to kind of give you perspective, how much pathogen can go into the environment. Um, One thing I did in Arizona, so July, August is our monsoon season, and hopefully we see a ton of rain during that time. But I would notice that, hey, we would have substantial increases in upper respiratory in our shelter. So what the operations manager and I did decide to do is we would have like 3 or 4 shutdown days in July and 3 or 4 shutdown days in August. And we would deep clean our shelter, and literally every part of the shelter and everybody, for the most part, would take part in it. And we'd really, really be good about it. And that seemed to really, really decrease our respiratory issues in the months of July and August. So there's things like that you can do, but I know it's a constant challenge. And I think it's your buildings, your airflow, your intake, how you're vaccinating, which vaccines are you using? Are you using intranasal? Are you using oral? Are you using injectable? All those things kind of play into upper respiratory and Bordetella. So it is one, it's not a very fast answer that I have.
Perfect. And the next question, what would be your recommendation to begin a vaccination for kittens and puppies in the shelter setting?
So at the time, and I will tell you right now, I follow ASV guidelines, so Association of Shelter Veterinarians, and right now the guidelines are between 4 to 6 weeks. I realize that is off-label for if you're reading the labels on vaccines like distemper parvo and HCP, but it's 4 to 6 weeks is my recommendation. That's what I've been doing. There's discussion around vaccines and when to start them if we start them earlier, but I'll tell you right now, 4 to 6 weeks is what people are talking about right now. But I realize there's some other discussions out there as well.
Perfect. And the next question is a bit more rescue related. Do you recommend using rescue for home use on animal bedding litter boxes? So we do have a couple of resources and foster protocols as well for at-home use that I could send over in our follow-up email.
Yeah. Yep, and I absolutely agree. And I used to talk to my fosters all the time, and fosters were great. If you're like, hey, here's where you can buy rescue, because we have the 55-gallon drums. So, hey, here's where you can buy the wipes. Here's where you can buy the concentrate. Here's where you can buy the ready-to-use liquids. They were more than happy. They wanted to do it. They wanted to provide a really, really good environment for the pets they were fostering.
Perfect. So I believe that is all the questions we have for right now. I would like to thank you so much, Dr. Gates, and thank you everyone for attending today's webinar, From Essential to Exceptional, Strengthening Your Animal Care Team's Role in Shelter Health. If you have any other questions, please visit rescuedisinfectants.com, or you have a few more minutes, put them in the chat. We'll also send out a follow-up email within 24 hours with a link to additional resources and the recording of today's webinar. So on behalf of Virox Technologies, Inc. And our presenters, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks.